Today's episode is negotiation strategies to get paid what you want. We're going to walk through a number of things, and I'm going to bring you back to a story a number of years ago that I am it grieves me to this day because I really compromised my value around my pricing. I was told that this was years ago and I was starting my business. And of course, for those of you that have a business, it is very much that you want to have clients right away. You want to get clients, of course. And so what happened was a friend of mine that works with this company said, I would love to refer you. It would be great for you to go. And it would be me actually going on site there. And I won't tell you what city because I don't want this company to be revealed here in this episode. But ultimately, my contact told me that they only had a very small amount of money. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like basically it was essentially like 10% of my normal fee. And I really wanted the business. She said, I think there's a lot of future business for you here potentially. And I remember then when I talked to the contact, here was my mistake. I went straight in with, I know that you have this amount of budget. When instead, I should have started with, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the goal that I can help you with? And act as if it was a brand new conversation that I would have with any new potential client. So it was very unfortunate from the beginning that I said the rate that my friend had said that they had. And I felt just sick about it when I got on the plane and when I got there, and the CEO didn't even, like, the doors were closed when I got there. It was a horrible experience. The employees really appreciated it, but the CEO showed up late. Everything that happened showed that this person did not value me. I am so grateful that I learned from that experience, never doing that again. And since then, I have learned and experienced how amazing it is when you work with someone that really values you. So, whether you are in a corporate career or whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, these tips apply. So, find what will come out of this for you. And I will say that most of it is around mindset. Most of it is around what you believe that you can charge, that you want to charge, and being willing to say no. And my big issue was too often compromising myself, doing it for less. And I have come to see how often we do this, particularly as women. We lower our prices, we compromise ourselves, and then we feel resentful or frustrated. So the first thing that I want to ask you is to reflect on is, what is your biggest challenge in asking for what you want? For many people, it's they don't want to bother people, they don't want to rock the boat, they feel like they're just making someone else uncomfortable potentially. There's a lot of different things. So when you can determine what your reason is, that can help us get to the root of the problem. Now, I want to frame this whole conversation today with a negotiation equation that I created, which is confidence times clarity times connection. You've got to have confidence when you're saying what you will charge and what your rate is. You also want to have clarity. Like, this is what I charge. Have that price point be the price that you say that it is. And then connection, making sure that you have a connection. So you're building a relationship with that person. And that those three things help with any negotiation. Now, in thinking about some mindset shifts, you want to think about reframing your mind. Number one, remember that you are not your client's wallet. You are also not your boss's wallet. Similar to the story that I shared earlier when I said, oh, I already know what they have. Now, that was intel that was given to me, which I should have just acted as if I didn't know that. That was my mistake. But a lot of times we're afraid to ask for the salary that we want, or we're afraid to ask for the business that we want or the price that we want to charge because we make assumptions about what the person can pay or not pay. One of my coaches years ago said, I live in Tennessee and there are trailer parks all around me. And do you know what else I see in those trailer parks? Are huge satellite dishes and really fancy cars. People will find money with things for things that they want to pay for. So that is something to keep in mind. And remember that you, whether you're working in a company or you're an entrepreneur, your work saves people time, stress, and emotional energy. This is all you are providing a service in whatever work that you do. And keep in mind that you've got to ask for what you want. So let's talk about 4 steps. I call it the confidence key, which is all about unlocking possibilities. And these are the steps that I would suggest that you think about and that I want to walk you through whenever you're in a situation where you need to negotiate. And again, most of this is mindset. So, for step 1 is just identify your price or identify the salary that you want to make. What do you want it to be? And I know this is easier said than done. You've also got to be either in the right company or in the right rooms with people that can afford the rate that you want to be making. So remember to have the boundaries, set those boundaries, write them down so that you're not wavering or waffling when it comes to that conversation. And I will tell you something I have learned is structure creates confidence. When you walk into a situation and you say, this is what I want to make, or this is my fee, it creates this incredible confidence. So, and then you've also got to decide though, are you willing to walk away? So that is really important to remember. So, some of the common pitfalls that we have in determining our price is that we tend to feel guilty about asking. We feel, again, all the things we might be afraid of. Of course, there's things like backlash, which is totally real, especially in a corporate environment. And so you've got to have be the best judge of the situation. But oftentimes we don't ask for enough because we're, first of all, we're charging too little out of fear, and or we don't ask for enough. So much of this relates to fear. And this is now step 2. So step 1 was identify your price or what you want to make. And then step 2 is to face your fears. We've got to figure out, what is it that holds me back? So one of those things for a lot of us is self-doubt. And the first thing that I would ask you to ask yourself is, for you particularly, why is asking so hard? And I want to call out the fact that it's vulnerable to ask. You don't know what's on the other side of your ask. There's that awkward pause or limbo space between the time that you ask and then between the time that you get an answer. And it's either going to be yes, no, maybe, or it's even possible, especially hopefully you're not going to do this in an email, but sometimes we all have that problem where we might be ghosted by somebody or they just don't respond to us anymore. So that can really eat at your confidence as well and those fears that you have. So, a couple of exercises I want to offer you, and if you've been following me for a while, you've heard these before. One is called the Broadway musical exercise. So this is to notice the message of doubt that you tend to say to yourself over and over again. So maybe it's, I'm not good enough. And after a while, saying that, it erodes at your confidence. And yet, these subconscious things, words matter. We've got to be mindful of the words that we are feeding ourselves with. So, what you want to do instead is sing that same message like a Broadway musical. I'm not good enough. And suddenly, it's usually a little bit funny. You can tell probably that I'm smiling right now, and it almost seems a little ridiculous. Now, I'm not dismissing your fear or doubt. All we're doing is reprogramming your brain from a neuroscience perspective. We're reprogramming your brain to recognize the meaning behind that is now going to be different because of your tone of voice. Now, this is a great one to use in a pinch. Do this in the shower, do this in the car right before you have either a big, perhaps, conversation that you need to have or a presentation that you need to give. It's a great way to dismiss or diminish the self-doubt in the moment. The other one that you may have heard me say before is to create a celebration portfolio. This is one where you have a compilation of your accomplishments as well as a compilation of your character strengths. So things like positivity, you bring peace to the workplace, perhaps. It's easy to work with you. You tend to be likable. You make people feel comfortable. There's a lot of different things besides what you're actually accomplishing that are valuable. And a lot of times we overlook that. So the goal would be to collect that data and use that especially when you're not feeling as confident. That's step two. Step three is to prep. You have to know your audience as much as possible. Figure out what matters to them, anticipate their needs and objections before you even get into the conversation. And then when you're in that conversation, or even in advance, as much as you can, listen to look at them on social media. Talk to somebody that perhaps knows them if this isn't somebody that you know very well. But when you are in that conversation, you want to make sure that you are listening not just to their message and what they're saying, but also their body language cues. So ask probing questions to understand their needs for sure. And that is really key. So practicing those things in advance, anticipating those things. And I will tell you, ChatGPT is so helpful for all of these things. ChatGPT may not know your boss or may not know your potential client, but it can be really interesting to ask it questions and see what might come back. Like ChatGPT, how would you prep for this archetype? This is what I'm looking for. And you never know what can come out of that. Fascinating. Step four is to ask and be direct when you ask. Too often, what we do is we're indirect. I used to coach sales teams years ago, and we would put them into pairs in front of the room, and they each had a minute to pitch their product or service. Their main instruction if they did nothing else, their main instruction at the very end was to state a a specific ask. So instead of, let me get to let me finish the story here. I guess I can let myself, right? I'm talking to myself right now. Okay. So, because then I want to tell you what happened. So I recorded each of these pairs of 12 people in, again, pairs up front. And then I asked them by show of hands, how many of you would say that you made a direct request, that you asked directly at the end of your pitch? 90% of them had their hands up. But when we would watch them back, 90% of them did not make a direct ask. So if you start a sentence with the word if, and you think it's a question, you're probably wrong. So, for example, here's what's wrong. Don't say, if you'd like to learn more, or if you're interested, let me know. Those are passive asks. But if we're direct, we want to say, would you like to learn more? Are you interested? That creates an immediate, okay, I have to answer this question. It's a yes or no. And that will make you come across as much clearer. And you will also get a much better answer because it'll be a response to you rather than when you say, if you blah, 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 let me know. The reality is they probably won't, or it's just a passive way to get out of asking a direct question. And I get it. We all have anxiety and fear around asking, but you're definitely going to be a lot more efficient when you ask specifically. I want to offer you a strategy for how to turn a no into a yes. And this is one that I learned from Alexandra Carter. It's, what concerns do you have? A lot of times people just take a no and then they move on. But I would suggest if somebody says no, say, hey, help. It could be even something as simple as, help me understand. I'd love to understand, what is the biggest question, or excuse me, biggest concern that you have. I remember years ago, somebody decided not to work with me who was very excited about it in all of our conversations. And then when I asked her, was it I said, what was the biggest thing? And she said, price. And what was fascinating to me about that is this was at a time where I had asked her what her budget was, and that if she wanted to share that I could see potentially about scaling my services for her. Well, it still was an issue for her. And it was very insightful. It helped me understand. Okay, great. I mean, in that case, it was a done deal. She didn't want to talk anymore about that. But sometimes when you ask what concerns you have, you learn about the concerns, and then the concerns can unveil a whole other set of things that you can actually solve for them. In which case, they might go, oh my gosh, well, I made an assumption, and then it can turn things around. Some other tips are don't waver. I talked about this already, but waffling makes us look unsure and lack confidence, which lowers trust. And then being curious, that's all about seeking to understand. So the more you can be curious, ask questions. And one of my favorite questions, especially for those of you that are business owners, but this could also be anything at a work environment too, is where would you like to go from here? This is also very helpful for a difficult conversation strategy. When you say, where would you like to go from here? It puts the ownership on the other person in a very inviting way. You're not pressuring them into a sale. You're not pressuring them to make a decision. You're simply asking, where would you like to go from here? And it creates this beautiful agency and permission for the other party. It's one of my favorites. The other one that I love is, how did this land for you? Or how did that land for you? I was working with somebody else recently who was negotiating a potential salary increase, which was actually a consultant role. And she did, first of all, she did a great job up front. She asked them first, what do you have a range that you would like to be paying this person? And they gave her the range, which is the most powerful negotiation strategy of all. When somebody reveals their cards first, then it helped her. And they were actually much higher than the highest range that she brought up. And so it was so great. So she was able to say her highest range and say, this is what I was thinking. And what I love too about this particular client is that she didn't go way up to the highest of the range of the offer. And at first I thought, why didn't you do that? But her rebuttal to me was, what I recommend, what I said was a fair offer. If I were gone to the top of the range that they were suggesting, she goes, I truly am not in that position. If we look at, so in other words, she was not just trying to get a lot of money, which there's no problem with wanting to get a lot of money, but you also have to have common sense and good judgment and be reasonable. So I love the fact that she was really reasonable. She mentioned, again, the top is part of her range, but without overqualifying herself. The other tips that I would offer you here is to make sure when you're negotiating that you communicate with confidence. You want to remember to have that strong voice, eye contact, looking people in the eye, using some hand gestures, having a nice posture, an open posture versus closed off with your hands, and making sure that you speak with authority. You don't want to speak with a question mark, so it sounds like you don't know what you're talking about. Making sure that you have that vocal conviction is critical because this is so important. You have to make sure to state your price, state what you want, and then zip it with your mouth. Silence is so important. Silence is a sales tool. Silence is an important negotiation tool. So those are some tips. I wanted to mention that a lot of times, I know for business owners, I've had people say that, like, they're asking me questions around if they get pushback saying, well, that's too expensive or whatever it is. So this is where you've got to own your rates. And one of my clients actually said a really great sort of tongue in cheek, but I think it's a really powerful statement. If you think hiring an expert is expensive, try hiring an amateur. I thought that was hilarious because it's true. You will end up probably spending more money in the end. And this is where really claiming your value and claiming your worth is super important. So, very, very important. So, I want to remind you this confidence checklist, which is before giving your price or saying your salary requirements, ask yourself, am I separating my finances from my finances from my clients or potential client or boss? Do I know which pricing model I'm using, or do I know which salary that I'm specifically asking? What is my range? What is the most that I want to make? What is the least? What is your walk away rate? You would need to know that. And do you have your script ready? Very important to have your script ready. Are you prepared to pause in silence after you say it? And do you have a plan for when to either ask for a raise next or when to raise your prices, depending upon if you're a business owner or if you are an employee? So these are some really, really important tips. I want to offer a couple of other scripts related to, now this is more focused on business owners, but it certainly relates to a number of people. So let's say somebody says, if you're a business owner, well, I can't afford it. And so here's a potential script. I totally get it. Many of my clients felt that way at first, but then they realized the cost of not solving this problem was even higher. Can I ask you back, what would it cost you in time, energy, or money to keep things the way they are now? That's a great question. And then you could follow up if they still hesitate and say, I really want to support you. I do offer smaller packages that might be a fit for where you are right now. Would you like me to walk you through them? Another one is, can you give me a discount? And let's say somebody says, can you take 20% off or whatever it is? And again, I would recommend that you don't discount your services. And so you could flat out say, I don't discount my services because I put the same level of expertise and care into every client project. What I can do is adjust the scope to fit a smaller budget. Would you like me to show you what that could look like? So again, for always have options. You always want to have options at the ready so that you can present them with clarity. The most important thing here is to be crystal clear when you're negotiating. Now, let's review and talk about the 4 steps to the confidence key. One is to identify your price. Know what you want to charge, or if it's salary, know what you want to make and know the high end of the range and the low end of the range. Number 2, face your fears, overcome that doubt. Number 3 is to prep so that you can anticipate your audience's objections and their needs in advance. And number 4 is to ask directly. And then ask more probing questions so that you can be curious and show that you're interested and inquisitive. And that is going to give you a much more successful formula than walking in without a plan. So make sure you have a plan. On that note, hey, I wanted to ask a favor. Two things. One, if you haven't rated the podcast and you're enjoying it, please do that. It would mean the world to me, and it helps more people find the podcast as well. And secondly, I am opening up the Powerhouse again starting in January. So this is for high achieving women who want to overcome self-doubt, speak with power, and negotiate in ways so that they can command any room that they walk into. If this is something you're even potentially interested in, it's on my website and KarenLaos.com. And then it says ways to work with me, and you click on that and it has the Powerhouse. So I would love to, I'm taking applications now. There's only going to be 12 women in that, and we're starting in January. So would love to schedule a call or set up a time, or just go to the website and you can apply directly. All right. Have a great rest of your day. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.